Welcome into another live Patriots Q A. I'm Sierra Goodwill here with Evan Lazar. Happy Friday, everyone. Before we get into it, just want to put a little promo out there for our most recent segments we've been putting out on a daily basis. Our countdown to camp segments have begun because we're getting close now to Patriots training camp, fingers crossed, and every day we're tackling a topic, top 10 burning questions heading into Patriots camp, so you can check that out on our website at clnsmedia.com and on our YouTube channel at Patriots Press Pass. As always, drop your questions in the live chat, tweet us. We'll get to them somehow. Evan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. It's Friday, so no complaints, and just praying every single day that we have a season, Sierra. That's all I'm doing now.
I know. Some people call us delusional because we're just going on and covering the team.
All we can do.
Everything's fine, but what else are we supposed to do? You know,
Right.
We're just trying to do our jobs, trying to talk about football. We can only hope. But the first question we have in here is actually about the topic we talked about on today's Countdown to Camp segment, and that's Damari Byrd and Jeff Thomas kind of replacing that Phillip Dorsett role. And Brady wants to know who you think will make the roster between the two, or if you think there's room for both of them.
Well, I think that it's a good question if there's room for both of them. I don't think there is room for both of them, and I really think that this is going to be a really difficult offseason and training camp for undrafted rookies to make the team. I mean, it's a really impossible task for those guys. Only a couple weeks of padded practice, no OTAs, no mini camp. This is the first time that they're going to be out on the field running Patriot schemes, running Patriot offense. And that's going to be really difficult, I think, for guys to break out in that role. And I could definitely see the Patriots and other teams hanging on to a lot of these undrafted guys that are rookies this year in their player pool for their practice squad, because really the practice squad this year, poaching from other teams' practice squads when you haven't seen any preseason games, you haven't seen much of training camp, it's not going to be the same, I don't think, as other years where they really get first-class views of these guys. Whereas with Damari Byrd, he's got the experience with Cam Newton already. He's got experience in the NFL already. I think that he's a little bit more pro-ready, so to speak, to get into that role instantly, where Phillip Dorsett really left a pretty big role behind. Now, it's not necessarily that Dorsett was targeted the most or played the most snaps, but just having that field stretcher was really important in certain schemes that the Patriots like to run. So I'll go with Damari Byrd in this one. I think it's going to be very difficult for any of these UDFAs to make the roster.
And that kind of rolls right into our next question. And how is it that the Patriots will determine their roster when the preseason is super condensed? It really comes down to training camp, I suppose, in the month of August for these players to prove themselves. Do you think that how much will that affect the Patriots and their decision-making for crafting their roster for the season?
I think it will hugely affect it, because I go back to last training camp, my first one on the B, and I remember Bill Belichick saying that really until they get the pads on, they're not evaluating players, right? That's just running what's called your basic stuff, right? Your basic fundamental stuff, what you're going to do on a weekly basis that you're going to lean on as your foundation. That's drilling that into those guys from a mental standpoint, getting everybody up to speed with the playbook, getting everybody up to speed with each other, building chemistry, that kind of stuff. Until you get the pads on, the evaluation process of who's going to make the roster and who isn't really doesn't start. And normally that happens at the end of July. Now it's probably going to happen closer to mid-August. And a lot of these guys that have never been on the team before or are undrafted rookies have a huge uphill battle to make their case, really. And I think it's going to be one of those years where a lot of veteran players that maybe get cut for cap reasons or get released to give a spot to a younger guy are probably going to hang on to those spots this year. And the teams are just going to roll with guys that have experience in the league or have experience in their system over these inexperienced guys. And it's a bummer because the Patriots find these guys all the time. Malcolm Butler, J.C. Jackson, Adam Butler. I mean, you can go right down the list. David Andrews, of all the undrafted guys over the years that have made Pro Bowls, made huge impacts for the Patriots. And now they're going to have to go without that, at least for this year, I think.
Well, Ashwin here asking a pretty specific question about the two rookie tight ends. What do you think Bill Belichick values more, Devin Asiasi's play action vertical routes or Dalton Keene's on-field versatility?
Well, I think Ashwin's been reading and listening to us quite often, because this is what I've been talking about since they drafted both of these guys. Mm-hmm. And with Asiasi, I think the good thing with him, and the reason why I kind of lean towards that a little bit more, but I'll make a case for Keene too, is that when you watch Cam Newton play with Greg Olsen, a lot of the routes that Asiasi is going to be asked to run here are very similar to where Cam and Greg Olsen feasted in the middle of the field, quick post, over routes, things like that, in between the numbers. And that's really where they lived with Cam and Greg Olsen. And Cam was one of the best quarterbacks in the league at throwing to tight ends and throwing to guys in the middle of the field. So that's definitely something that I think that he will like to lean on with Asiasi. But with Keen, I think that it depends on how much smoke and mirrors are we going to really get into with Cam's mobility, right? How much of a threat are they really going to make Cam's mobility on a week-to-week basis? Because that's when you can really utilize an H-back, fullback type of position where you can play him in the backfield, you can play him off the line a little bit, slide him outside the formation into the flats, or use him as a blocker from different angles and things like that. Those are huge when you look at schemes like Baltimore's, for example, where they got 3 tight ends out there some of the time and everybody's kind of running all over the place. And these defenses have false keys all over the place, and then they need to figure out where the ball is, and that's sort of where that confusion comes in. So the question is how much do they lean into that? How much does Josh McDaniels open up the playbook to Cam's mobility? I think that will be kind of a big precursor to how much Dalton Keen's involved.
Well, I know you like this question because we have talked about this before, but not in a while. Byron Cowart, sleeper breakout. What do you think?
Well, I think that Byron Cowart certainly did enough last year to make the team, and his explosiveness off the ball and his power at the point of attack are two things that stand out instantly. And he's an instant pocket pusher, an instant present as a pass rusher. But there's been concerns with him throughout his career as a run defender, and that's really where the Patriots, I think, need it more than necessarily the pass rush. The pass rush, they're probably only going to play 2 or 3 defensive linemen at a time, and they're going to really rely on their linebackers like they did last year and rely on their blitz packages to generate pressure on the quarterback. Whereas with Cowart, I think that he really has a more of a chance to carve out a role as if he can improve his run defense and be with a third guy alongside Lawrence Guy and Bo Allen to be there in the middle of the defense. So we'll see how he improves against the run. You know, there are certain things, pad level, keeping his head down, ducking his head into contact, things like that are fixable that just need to be coached into him and drilled into him.
We have a question here about the run game and how much improvement we should see from the run game because the offensive line is back healthy. This person notes 2 massive receivers in N'Keal Harry and Mohamed Sanu. I don't know if I'd call them massive, but bigger guys and 4 new tight end / fullbacks. How much do you expect the run game to see a lot more production this season?
I think the Patriots need it. I think that that's the expectation. Mm-hmm. Really what our question here didn't put in that answer was Cam Newton. You know, I really think that the biggest thing for this Patriots offense is that last year they ran 37% of their runs were against heavy boxes with 8+ defenders in the box. That was the most in the league. And that's like driving yourself into a brick wall every single time you hand the ball off to your running back with 8 guys in the box and only 7 blockers. You're literally running yourself into a wall every single time. And you're hoping that execution and great blocking will open up holes on one side of the formation for the running back. So now being able to play 8-on-8 with the quarterback as a running threat, that opens up a whole avenue of possibilities, zone read, gap read concepts, obviously RPOs, but definitely just the threat of Cam Newton being there, I think can really open up this running game to the next level. And then you put in there that they have all 5 starters returning and they have that starting 5 on that offensive line that's going to be really solid. That to me is going to have to be the foundation and the leaning piece of this offense is that O-line. That's where the money's invested. That's where the draft picks are invested. They're going to have to get that group to be a top 5 unit and lead a running game that is going to be really, really crisp and produce extremely high level. We're not talking about a 2018 Patriots. We're talking about like Baltimore Lamar Jackson style, right? Where they're running for over 5.5 yards per carry. Maybe it won't be that potent, but anything like that, I think is the closest thing the Patriots are going to get to having a really elite offense.
The next question, if I'm reading it right, who's going to be able to stop a toss with the Patriots edge blocking? Concerns about the edge defenders right now on the Patriots? Is that what this is getting at?
I think they're saying that because of the blockers that they have, if they toss the ball out to their running back on the edge, it's going to be difficult for teams to defend that. And I think that that's definitely true. I think that this has a really great chance to be a potent rushing attack. And we're not, just like I said, we're not talking about 2018 Patriots. We're not talking about some of the Corey Dillon years. I'm talking about a Baltimore rushing style, a Dak Prescott and Dallas Cowboys style, maybe a Niners and Kaepernick, and obviously a Carolina and Cam Newton style, right? And that's the sort of running game I'm really looking forward to. And like Cam said, they're getting a dog, and they're getting a guy that Josh McDaniels has never been able to call plays for like this before.
Alex here is saying, outside of New England, there's not much talk about JC Jackson. Do you think he's a top cornerback, underrated, overrated? We know he's carved out a nice role for himself in the Patriots secondary among a really deep group.
I think right now he's properly rated as somebody that's probably going to be a CB1 someday, but still kind of in that CB2 category right now. I think the biggest reason why is, as good as JC Jackson is at playing the ball in the air, and he is fantastic at that. And whenever he is targeted, it always seems to go back poorly for the opposing quarterback and wide receiver. But what you see is that he is kind of one-dimensional being outside on the boundary, where he really has to use that sideline or that post safety help in the middle of the field as a crutch, right? And there's really not as much Gilmore, I'm on an island, I'm all by myself going on with JC Jackson. A lot of it is, he's taking the second or the third receiver, right? The guy is probably not the first option in the progression. It's usually a deep ball, right? And I think last season, what you started to see late in the year is that teams were moving him into the slot a little bit more. The Miami Dolphins attacked him when they moved him in the slot. They move him in the slot, and then they were running underneath patterns against him. They know he's not going to give up a deep completion. And JC Jackson said this himself after that game. He said, they know they're not going to beat me deep, so they're going to start trying to attack me underneath until he gets his game completely well-rounded to defend all types of routes, all types of receivers, and all alignments. He's not going to be talked about in the elite corners like a Stephon Gilmore or a Trey White or Jalen Ramsey or somebody like that who travels with a lot of guys and is able to kind of play inside, outside, and protect against any sort of route.
And Robert wants to know, we talked about Patrick Mahomes getting paid. Dak has not yet been paid. With Dak's contract issues in Dallas, could he be a Patriot target in the future?
I love it. Let's bring Dak here. No, I don't think that that's going to happen. I do think it is interesting, though, in Dallas. If you believe in your quarterback, you don't play him on the franchise tag, right? That's not usually the way that this goes. If you truly believe in your quarterback, usually you reach an extension with that guy pretty easily. And it's really kind of about the particulars of the contract and the guarantees and when the money, the cash flow of the deal and all that kind of stuff. And it's very seldom a problem of total dollars, right? A problem of, we don't believe in you. We don't want to get to that number with you. And seeing that Dallas went there with Dak and said, we're not going to meet your money here. We're not going to match your offer. It is interesting to see that his own team doesn't really want to push that envelope. I mean, it's very, very small sample size of teams that franchise their quarterback, think he's the guy and think he's the guy of the future, and then don't reach an extension with him before the deadline. It hardly ever happens.
Well, here it is, Ashwin asking the question that I mistakenly asked 2 questions ago. Do you think that edge is one of the Patriots' more overlooked needs, or do you trust the rooks as in, well, Winovich isn't a rookie anymore, but in his second year, Dietrich Wise and the rookies coming in to step up in that position?
This to me is one of the most under talked about storylines of the offseason, was just how much the Patriots actually lost in Kyle Van Noy and Jamie Collins. I think that people, and me too, I feel fell victim to it as well, are so accustomed to Bill Belichick just plucking some guy off the street and putting him right into a spot in his defense and having the thing not miss a beat, right? We see it every single year. And at some point you kind of have to feel like it's not going to come back and to bite them. But according to approximate value, which is a Pro Football Reference stat, the Patriots lost more from their defense than any defense has in the last 20 seasons in free agency, and they didn't replace it with any notable veterans. Brandon Copeland didn't register on the scale. Maybe he's a notable veteran to some people, but the point being is that they really lost a ton on that defense. Harmon, Collins, KVN, Danny Shelton, and they really didn't replace it with anything. Right. And that, I think, is one of the more underreported storylines of the offseason so far, is that the Patriots are going to count on Bo Allen, who's been kind of a journeyman, who's been successful at times, but really needs to kind of hit his stride to be a Danny Shelton type. But more importantly, a bunch of young players to take over for 2 stalwarts on that defense last year in Collins and KVN, who really produced a ton of big plays. It wasn't just that they're fundamentally sound guys. It was big splash plays behind the line of scrimmage, pressures on the quarterbacks, tackles for loss against the run. Who's going to replace all that production is really going to be the biggest question for this defense.
We have a comment here. Anthony Jennings is the next Ninkovich. Changed my mind. So obviously we haven't seen rookie Jennings play at all yet, but do you see where these comparisons are being drawn?
Well, I would say that Jennings is closer in body type than Kyle Van Noy than Ninkovich. Ninkovich was a little bit stouter, a little bit sturdier, more of a defensive end, I would say. Whereas Van Noy was a true outside linebacker. He's a guy you're going to put it in a 2-point stance almost 100% of the time and not really put his hand in the dirt. Whereas Ninkovich could really get his hand in the dirt and be inside the tackles and still be a little bit effective. I think Anthony Jennings more fits that Van Noy mold, which is still a very solid player. But I think when you look at Jennings compared to, let's say, Josh Uche, the one thing that really stands out is the power at the point of attack and that ability to anchor on the strong side of a run and not be pushed off the ball. Uche is much more of a speed kind of athletic type of player, whereas with Jennings, he's more of a stout run defender at the end of the line. So I think the Patriots are really hoping that he can develop into that strong side edge force to be able to push those runs back inside.
And we're getting a question here about Njoku, but earlier this week we did a full segment on potential trade between the Patriots for David Njoku. So you can check that out on our Patriots Press Pass YouTube channel for your full thoughts on it. But Evan, a 5th round pick is pretty much what you said would be worth it.
Yeah, I think it would be worth it to trade for him if it was something like a day 3 pick that wasn't a ton of value. I think the biggest thing, though, that you do look for is that there's a ton of expectations here for Devin Asiasi and Dalton Keene. And yesterday, I ran a bunch of numbers on rookie tight ends, and the numbers are not pretty, right? These guys usually don't come in year 1 and produce at a high level. I think the average for a tight end not drafted in the first round in his rookie season was somewhere around 245 receiving yards with about 22 catches, something like that. So we're talking about very low production. Now, at the same time, the Patriots got so little out of their tight ends last year that anything above that is going to be felt, right? That's going to be something that's going to be good for them. But I think when you look at it, expecting those two guys to really break out and have a huge year as rookies is kind of unprecedented. It's really just Rob Gronkowski, Mark Andrews, George Kittle. We're talking about all pro players, right? We're not talking about guys that are usually just kind of, above average starters in their careers. We're talking about potential Hall of Famers down the road. So that I don't think that I think the expectations here are too high right now for those two guys, at least from a production standpoint. I wouldn't be drafting any of them in fantasy anytime soon.
Let's talk linebackers here. Ryan wants to know what linebackers will serve as the coverage linebackers, or will they use Patrick Chung or Adrian Phillips in that role?
Well, that's another thing I think with Collins out the door too, that sort of needs to be talked about a little bit more, is the fact that in their base defense now, Hightower has really developed into a very good coverage player, a much better coverage player than he was at times in his career. And I think a lot of that has to do with the speed training that he's done in the offseason to be a little bit quicker, a little bit faster and lighter on his feet. But I think at the same time, when you look at this sort of base defense of the Patriots, that they did roll out there a decent amount last year, they don't really have that option this year, I don't think, anymore. And the guys that they're going to rely on, I do believe, are those safeties. And they're going to insert those safeties in the box and let them handle underneath zones, let them handle running backs and tight ends and man coverage, and really take the responsibility away from the linebackers. Dante Hightower last year had the second fewest snaps in coverage of any off-ball linebacker in the league and the most pass rush snaps of any off-ball linebacker. So Bill Belichick has really pigeonholed his role on passing downs to just being a pass rusher for the most part. And I would assume that those linebackers stick with that this year.
Do you see the rookie Josh Uche playing inside linebacker?
I do. I think Uche is going to play both on and off the ball. I think that's really what they liked most about him, other than some of his pass rush, prowess and ability to rush the passer, was certainly the fact that he can play both positions in that defense. So he's a lot more of that hybrid type. Jennings is really more just an end of line guy. He's going to be on the line of scrimmage. He's going to be a true outside linebacker in a 3-4. Whereas with Uche, I truly think that he can move on or off the line and be sort of that Collins, Van Noy type, Hightower type that they play in different spots. And that's really going to be fun to see exactly where do they see him full time and where does he kind of be able to branch out a little bit, even as a rookie. Are they going to give him that opportunity to go ahead and play both off and on the line?
We're going back in history real quick here, Leon. In hindsight, in the 2018 draft, should the Patriots have drafted Chubb instead of Sony Michel? What did Bill Belichick see in Michel over Chubb?
That draft was going back. I'm not going to sit here in hindsight and play that game because I think it's unfair for multiple reasons. So let's go back to that draft and revisit exactly the decision that was made then in 2018. So the two things that were really working against Nick Chubb here in this offense was, one, he also had pretty chronic knee issues. He tore his ACL at Georgia, and a lot of teams had a lot of doubts about how long he was going to last in the league, just the same as they had with Sony. So I think that those two knee injuries kind of washed out for most teams in their draft boards. The second thing is at least at Georgia, Sony was much more the speed back and the receiving back, believe it or not, than Nick Chubb. And Nick Chubb was really more the between the tackles, pounding, ground and pound type of player. So I think a lot of comparisons to Chubb in 2018 were somebody like a Corey Dillon, right? Someone that is going to run people over and be a force between the tackles and be great after contact, which is exactly what he's turned out to be. But he's not going to be much of a dynamic pass catcher or a two-way threat. Whereas with Michel, the comparisons coming out were closer to somebody like a Noshawn Moreno or a Alvin Kamara on a top end, kind of projection, right? And those two guys were much more versatile players, could run from the gun or under center, could do a couple of different things. And it just kind of flipped when it got to the NFL. And, these guys kind of went on a different paths and the roadside sort of forked, and Michel went the wrong direction. And everybody kind of thought that Chubb was going to be down this path, and it turned out to be Michel. So I think that both of those guys, looking back on it, it was a toss up which one to pick. The Patriots picked the guy that was supposed to be more versatile, and it just didn't work out that way.
Last couple questions here. Would you rather see the Patriots trade Joe Tunney or sign him long-term? We know he's playing 1 year under the franchise tag with a cap hit of just under $15 million this season. This person says, I'd rather see them cut bait with Shaq Mason if it's a matter of keeping one.
Poor Shaq Mason has just gotten thrown under the bus. Last year, he was the number one rated guard in all of Pro Football Focus's rankings. Every Patriots fan, he's the best guard in football. He's the best guard in football. Now he's not even the best guard on his own team, apparently. So that's how full circle we've come with Shaq Mason after one season. I want the Patriots to pay Joe Tunney. I want them to keep this offensive line intact. I think the biggest thing that they have going for them in the post-Brady era is pass protection and run blocking out of this group. Having 5 starters with experience that are all very good players at their position is really key to ushering in this new era. You put a Cam Newton who has that injury history. You put a new quarterback like Jarrett Stidham behind an offensive line where he's under pressure all game long, and you're going to see them fail. And that's just the we saw it with Marshall Newhouse last year with Tom Brady's blindside, and you'd see it again if you let Joe Tunney go. I truly think that the best course of action for them moving forward, they're going to have a ton of cap space over the next couple of years, is to keep that offensive line intact and keep whoever is behind center protected and get that running game to be a vocal part of the offense as well. And letting Tunney go or letting Shaq Mason go, I promise you, there will be a big step back. You let Tunney go this season, you're looking at Jermaine Illuminor or Yelda Froholt or one of these rookies that they just drafted this year starting on your offensive line for 16 games. I'm not ready to do that.
And quickly, we're just going to talk about Kyle Duggar real quick to finish up this live stream, although we did do an in-depth video on Kyle Duggar as well as one of our Countdown to Camp segments yesterday on our Patriots Press Pass YouTube channel, so I encourage you all to check that out as well. They think Duggar deserves more love. What do you think about him as a potential X factor on the defense this season?
Yeah, I think that he does deserve more love. And I think that he's kind of getting slept on because of these linebackers and because of the tight ends the Patriots drafted. They're getting a ton more buzz. Whereas with Duggar, they just let Duron Harmon traded him to Detroit. They have an open spot for that free safety role behind Devin McCourty, which is exactly where Duggar played in that line or Ryan defense. And then he also has that versatility to eventually be able to come up to the line of scrimmage and cover tight ends, cover potentially slot receivers too. And I just think that he's one of those players that really could take everybody by surprise because they do have a role for him on the defense that I think is kind of being slept on with that Harmon role. I think that he could be that guy to go into that spot and become a real true center fielder at times. And I think that that's one of those players that, because they have so much depth at safety, because Devin McCourty is still here, because Patrick Chung is still here, we're thinking of Kyle Duggar 2 years from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, down the road, when those guys have moved on and retired or move on to different organizations. I think that he has a chance to play on defense right away if he can prove to the coaches that he can handle those deep middle of the field responsibilities.
Well, there you have it for another live Patriots Q&A. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back here same time, same place, 1 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday to answer all your questions if we weren't able to get to them today. In the meantime, check out all of our Patriots coverage on our website at clnsmedia.com, on our YouTube channel here at Patriots Press Pass. Make sure you subscribe so you don't only miss our live streams that we do twice a week, but you can check out all of our countdown to camp coverage, as I've plugged a couple times this live stream. We really appreciate